Hello, this is BBC News. I'm Martine Croxall. All right, you can have a drink, it's okay. We'll be taking a look at tomorrow morning's papers in a moment. Don't spill it. But yeah, maybe put it down. Let's look at the headlines. It's 11:30. Theresa May has refused to say whether she knew about a failed Trident missile test when MPs were voting to renew the weapons system.
I have absolute faith in our Trident missiles. When I made that speech in the House of Commons, what we were talking about was whether or not we should renew our Trident.
Trade, NATO and Brexit are likely to be high on the agenda when the Prime Minister meets Donald Trump this Friday. President Trump and his White House team have launched a furious attack on the media, accusing them of lying about the size of the crowds at his inauguration on Friday. No spillages here. Hello, welcome to our look ahead to what the papers will be bringing us tomorrow. With us, broadcaster Natalie Haynes and Rob Merrick, Deputy Political Editor at The Independent. Nice to have you both here. Tomorrow's front pages then, starting with, which is it? The FT. Thank you, Fiona. It leads with more reaction to the Trump administration's hard line against what it calls the dishonest media. The Eye says the Prime Minister's post-Brexit plan is to reboot British industry. The Daily Express has claims from a leading Brexit campaigner that up to 1 million EU migrants may head over to the UK over the next 2 years. The Metro says Theresa May is ready to challenge President Trump over sexist remarks when she meets him at the White House on Friday. The Telegraph says a free trade deal with the United States is likely to open the door to US jobs for British workers. Mirror has more on accusations that the Prime Minister didn't share knowledge of a failed Trident test ahead of a vote to renew the weapons system. And The Times reports that rural enterprises will be the biggest losers in forthcoming business rate rises in England. Not Trump, but Trident. Don't know if that makes you any happier. Here it is on the Daily Mirror. Trident failure cover-up, it says. May's missile crisis. Theresa May was asked quite a few times by Andrew Marr whether she knew about this failed test. Tell us what happened with the failed test first, if you would.
Well, this was the standout story from this morning, of course, in the Sunday Times. Most of the arguments about Trident revolve around the enormous cost, or about whether it increases or decreases the chance of nuclear Armageddon. We don't normally end up arguing about whether they work or not. But apparently these tests are only carried out about every 4 years, and the last one was carried out last June. And according to the paper, the missile went in the wrong direction and possibly veered off towards America, which would be very embarrassing indeed. And of course, nobody was told about this. That's the important point. And a month later, Parliament voted to renew Trident in a very contentious vote, in ignorance of the fact that allegedly Trident didn't work in a test 1 month earlier. And the Prime Minister is being accused of keeping that information from Parliament. And anyone who saw her on Andrew Marr this morning when she looked very, very uncomfortable and, as you say, declined 4 times to answer the question, could only assume that she did know and she did keep that information from Parliament.
Or she didn't know and should have known. I mean, so many ways of interpreting it.
Yes.
I mean, it wasn't armed. It didn't hit anybody.
You've set the bar quite low there, if you don't mind me saying so. Yeah, I mean, the good news is there wasn't a nuclear warhead on the missile that went wrong. And, you know, also it only veered off towards Florida. And hey, whoever goes to a theme park, hardly anyone and certainly no children. So, yes, the bad news is when you make it to The Guardian, it turns out the direction it was supposed to go in, West Africa, which I presume we didn't care about at all. So, yeah, nobody comes out of this covered with glory, do they? I think it's legitimate to say. But, yes, least of all, probably Theresa May, because failing to answer a question 4 times in a row, a direct, you know, did you or didn't you type question, does make you look shifty. You kind of have to, you can't go look over there a flamingo and then sort of wish it would go away. You sort of have to have a defence strategy in place.
The Guardian has a similar title. May accused of covering up Trident failure is its headline. MPs call for full disclosure of incident that took place before the critical vote. These don't take place that often because they're very expensive, these tests, aren't they?
£17 million for each test.
And I mean, obviously they have to carry them out every now and again to make sure, hopefully, everything's all right. It was to do with telemetry, apparently, I was told today. But apparently, ordinarily, not that many people would know about it. I mean, there are sort of confidential matters here. We are talking about a nuclear weapon.
Well, according to the Sunday Times, when the last but one test was carried out in 2012, it was given great prominence by the MOD, that produced video of the test and wanted to advertise to the world that Britain needs to be taken seriously because we have these Trident missiles. So when they worked, they got the full works in terms of publicity. And on the occasion that didn't, it was hushed up. So
That sounds like North Korea.
It sounds a little bit like North Korea, doesn't
so
it?
it was treated very differently. I have to say, I'm not sure it would have changed any votes in the House of Commons. I mean, most Conservative MPs and a chunk of Labour MPs are very, very keen on Trident and probably wouldn't have been dissuaded by the fact that one had malfunctioned. I think it betrayed the Prime Minister's inexperience, really, as PM this morning, because I think you can make a convincing case that she doesn't need to go on national television and talk in detail about a national security issue, or at least she could have used national security as a reason for not giving a straight answer.
Yes,
but she
could.
didn't do that. She didn't
No.
say, I'm not going to talk about national security issues. Instead, she just tried to pretend the question hadn't been asked 4 times, and to almost imply that the vote that took place a month later, the failed test was irrelevant to the vote, and I think that did make her look, a little less than honest this morning.
But will this reopen the whole discussion then about the renewal of Trident? Because there's bound to be a push for that from those who are critical of it.
Yes, you would hope so, but I think you're probably right that there's such a majority of MPs who are keen to stick with Trident that even though the leader of the opposition, of course, is famously anti-nuclear in all its forms and has been for his whole career, I think it will make absolutely no difference whatsoever. I think the numbers would be there even if the information had been out before the vote, I suspect.
We were
Yeah.
told it's the best system of its type today.
Yeah, it's almost like there's no such thing as
its
a
type.
flawless system.
The other thing I read recently about Trident is that apparently the software is based on Windows XP, which of course is no
Really?
longer supported by Windows. But
Hopefully there
Just
are one or
leave
two
that there.
clever folk who could sort that out.
Yeah, they've got abacuses. That's fine.
Oh dear, let's move on and
Reassured,
talk about the Prime Minister again, but this time her visit to see Donald Trump on Friday. The Times says May prepares to fight for free trade as Trump's first visitor. It depends who you believe. You might not have that much of a fight on our hands if we are a preferred trading partner.
Well, she's the first foreign leader to visit him, so I guess that presumably makes her feel like she's at the front of the queue. I mean, famously when the referendum debate was happening and Obama said we'd be at the back of the queue if we voted to leave, and people were very angry about all such things, and Boris Johnson impugned him over it, and now here's Trump literally putting her at the very front of the queue. So yes, perhaps she won't have to fight quite so hard. I think the trouble is that we're quite a small country relative to the US, and I think we export more to them than we import, although I may be wrong.
You are wrong.
Am I?
You are.
Am I?
You are.
And so in that case, it has to happen sometime.
I'm glad to help.
Yeah, thanks.
you could have just let that slide, couldn't you?
I could have
Yeah,
said that
you could have
slightly
said,
more
"No, it's
politely.
fine."
No, Natalie,
So-
don't worry.
So, okay, then in that case, they would like us better than we would like them? I don't think so. We're quite little and they're quite big.
Well, yes, the other thing is that at the moment, of course, the EU is a much bigger trading partner for us than the United States. Not likely to be replaced on that sort of level, is it, that scale?
Definitely not. No, I think what must worry lots of people in Britain is that this is being presented as a great coup, of course, the Prime Minister to be the first leader to get in and see Trump. And ordinarily, of course, that would be true of any normal president. It would be a coup. But this is not a normal president. Donald Trump is a monster.
Oh dear, I don't think I can let that pass.
You're going to
Rob,
dispute
would
it?
you like to... Well, I think monster, it makes him sound inhuman.
Okay.
Poor
But
monsters. Poor
but-
lovely
but
Oh,
I
monsters.
think-
please, you two.
Whoever want to door
Give
at
me a
Halloween.
chance here.
Everything that we're being told about the PM's trip and how desperate we are to sign a free trade deal just says that she's not going to go in there and stand up to him. She's not going to go in there and say that she wants to deal with him on accepted values in this country or in this continent, but to fawn at his feet, to kowtow, to be a lickspittle.
We don't know
And I
that.
think
That's a great word,
well,
though.
I can give
Yeah.
you one example of how British policy has already changed because of Donald Trump. And so last month, alongside America, as led by Obama, Britain voted against Israel's settlements in Palestine at the UN and condemned Israel. It was then made known by the Trump team how displeased they were with that. And in fact, they tried before the vote to dissuade Britain from voting that way. And they made known just how unhappy they were. And lo and behold, a couple of days later, Britain makes a speech condemning Trump's policy towards Israel. So we displeased Trump. we were given a stern telling off, and I'm pretty sure we said we ain't going to happen again. And so that's British policy towards Israel is already changing because how desperate we are to cuddle up to Trump.
The Daily Telegraph says May trade deal will open door to US jobs. I thought it was America first, so will we get jobs as Brits in America?
It's about a million each way, isn't it? About 1 million Brits working in the US and about 1 million Americans working in Britain, apparently. And the theory is that we could have even more of those things. So the Telegraph says that I don't have my glasses, so to be honest, I could just be making this up.
It's a very sweet. I've got my lenses in, and they don't really help.
I know. What's the average age of somebody who reads the Telegraph? Surely they're bespectacled. I can't believe it.
With a bright light and a magnifying glass, I would need.
Honestly, that's what I wish. I wish I were here like Jessica Fletcher, magnifying glass in front of eye. But there it is. A million Americans. See, I can read it.
The Daily Mail's got a much bigger font. Let's move on to that.
That's what I need.
If only for that reason.
That's what I need.
Terrorists fast train to Britain exclusive. Mail exposes shocking security flaws that allow anyone to get to the UK on Eurostar without a passport. How?
Well, that's a really interesting story. For anyone who's travelled on Eurostar, anyone who has would remember that you go through very strict border checks in Brussels, before you leave Belgium rather than when you get to Britain. But what it says here is that if you get on in Brussels and say to them you're only going to the next stop, which is Lille in France, within the Schengen zone, which don't require any border checks, then you could say that you go to Lille and stay on all the way to the UK and therefore evade all border checks in travelling between Belgium and the UK, which the Mail says is a risk in terms of terrorists and criminals being able to exploit that loophole. It says at the bottom of the front page here that this Lille loophole was supposedly closed after it was revealed in 2011. And then it says turn to page 4. So anyone who wants to know more must buy the Daily Mail tomorrow.
But surely if you can't, wouldn't somebody check your ticket to realise that you'd only got a ticket as far as Lille?
On the train. I only know this because I got the train from Brussels to London about 2 weeks ago. So yeah, they check your ticket when you get on at Brussels and they check your passport and you go through Belgian customs and British customs together at Brussels. But then I would be astonished if very many people travelled from Brussels to Lille by that mechanism, because the trains are pretty irregular. They go about every 2 hours and you have to go through all of that security, and you could just get the local train service, the B trains, to there. So I would be surprised if very many people did it, but that's not the same as not being able to, and it's not the same as no one. So I can see why the Mail thought this was a good story to splash.
It does seem strange if 5 years ago it was highlighted and nothing's happened in the interim.
Let us look at the Sun. Official warning, you've had your chips, boffins. And Ross, who's in the gallery tonight, hates that word, along with geeks. And, nerds, hates that. Boffins link fries to cancer. Why?
Well, that's a good question, and the answer to that question is that the Food Standards Authority has begun a campaign trying to persuade us that we should stop having super brown roast potatoes and dark toast and other such things because of what I think is acrylamide.
It is very good.
Not to be right in pronunciation, as they believe to be carcinogenic drug. I have to tell you that Professor David Spiegelhalter, who is the Professor for the Understanding of Public Risk or something, Public Understanding of Risk and Science or something like that at Cambridge, has pointed out that there's very little evidence and that we should perhaps be feeling a bit less anxious about things. I think the tests have been done on mice, and mice, and I don't want to shock anybody, are less keen to consume roast potatoes than, for example, me?
Yes, I think so.
They're probably keen on peanuts.
Chips and crisps, keep having brown toast.
They're all the major food groups.
They know. I've never seen mice eating pizza or toast. I think they know something.
That's it. For the papers tonight, some slightly light relief. Don't forget, all of the front pages are online on the BBC News website. You can read a detailed review of them 7 days a week at bbc.co.uk/papers. We're there too. Each night's edition of the papers is posted on the page shortly after we've finished, and it's on iPlayer. Natalie, Rob, thank you. See you again soon. Bye for now.